Today we're going to learn about imaginary numbers, which sounds ridiculous because you're like, what the heck? I have to learn about real numbers and now I have to learn about imaginary numbers? I know. But you'll understand where they come from after at the end of the lesson. So it says simplify square root of negative 16. And so a lot of people look at that and they say, all right, well, I think the answer is just negative 4. And this is why it is not negative 4. It's because what you're really figuring out is what times itself equals the inside of the radical. And so if I was going to take negative 4 and multiply by negative 4, I still get positive 16. I don't get negative 16. And so how you have to approach this problem is I am going to forget about the negative right now. And I am just going to look at, well, what if I just suck out that negative, make it a negative 1 times 16. So we know that the square root of 16 is 4, but I still have that negative underneath the radical. And so some dead old guy came up with imaginary numbers. So it's a number whose square is a negative. I equals square root of negative 1. So the answer to this problem would be 4i. It's also the only number you can square and get negative 1. There's no other number that you can square and get a negative number. So simplify using I. It's quite simple actually. So what you do is you just change the negative sign to a plus and put an I on the outside and then proceed as normal. So square root of 36 is nice, so it's just 6, and then I have I. That's the answer. So number 2, I do the same thing. I make that a plus, I put an I on the outside. Then I break down 45. So 2 doesn't go into it, 3 does 15 times. 2 doesn't go into it, but 3 does 5 times. So that has a double. It comes on the outside with the I that we already brought outside. And I leave 5 on the inside. Now this all changes if it's a cube root because you can cube a number and get a negative. But for right now, when we're talking about even indexes, so square roots or fourth roots or sixth roots, you have to use I. So the next thing I'm going to talk about with i's is there is a pattern within the i's. So I to the first power is just I. And so if we were actually in the class, I would make someone stand up and I would say, all right, you're I. And so then if someone's added to you, so if you're I squared, so if there's 2 people in front of the classroom, I already told you in the top of your notes that I squared equals negative 1. So basically, if you are a couple in I world, then you become real. You become a negative 1. All right, so now if we have 3 people, so if we have a third wheel tagging along, then we have our negative 1, which is I squared, the couple, but then you have that third wheel, that I. Okay, now say we have a 4th person, so now we've got, here's our 4 people. So this 2 couple, I already told you that each couple makes negative 1, and this 2 couple makes negative 1. And so when I multiply those 2 couples together, negative 1 times negative 1, it's just 1. All right, now if I take these 2 couples and I add another I, a 5th wheel this time, well, we know that these 2 couples make 1, and then that we got that 5th wheel of I, so 1I. And remember that this negative 1I over here can just be the same thing as negative I, and this one can be the same thing as I. And this is something that you'll end up memorizing, but I like to explain why it works. So now let's look at 6. So I'm going to add another I, so we have another couple, so these 2 guys become negative 1. So now I'm going to multiply all these negative 1s together, and that gets me negative 1. So maybe you're seeing a pattern formed. We have I, negative 1, negative I, 1. I, negative 1. You could probably guess the next one is negative I, 1. And it starts over again. I, negative 1, negative I, 1. So it just keeps going on and on and on and dot, 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 dot. Forever. So the pattern or rule is that it always goes I, negative 1, negative I, 1. So that will just keep repeating on and on and on, and this is something that you will have to memorize. And the way that you can remember it is you can say, I won, I won. Get it? And then the middle 2 are always going to be negative. These 2 guys will always be negative. The other pattern that you might see is that every multiple of 4 is the same. So 4, 8, this one's 11, and this one's 12, so 12. They're all the same. They're all 1. You can't say that for the other multiples. Like, if you look at the multiples of 3, so 3, 6, 9, 12. Those are not all the same. This one's negative I, this one's negative 1, this one's I, but every multiple of 4 is always 1. So that is our second pattern. So this is our first pattern. Our second one is that every multiple of 4 is 1. And this is going to come in handy with the next section. So for the next one, we have I to the 20th. So what you want to do is you could continue writing that pattern. I won, middle term negative, I won, the middle term negative, until you get to 20. But a way easier way is to first figure out, is it divisible by 4? So you go to your calculator, ask yourself, is 20 divisible by 4? And hopefully you know that 20 is divisible by 4. So if it is divisible by 4, then the answer is just 1. If you would continue the pattern out, you would see it was 1. Now it gets a little trickier when it's not divisible by 4. So 74 is not divisible by 4. Nope, doesn't work. So what you have to find is the closest one that is divisible by 4. So you can either go down or you can go up. So I could try to see, okay, is 73 divisible by 4 or is 75 divisible by 4? It doesn't really matter. So like I'll go above, 75. So you do 75 divided by 4 in your calculator. You would not get a nice number. Then I'm going to try 76. I would say, okay, is 76 divisible by 4? Yes, it is divisible by 4. So if it is, that means it's 1. And remember, I'll rewrite my pattern up here. It's I, negative 1, negative I, 1. So 76 was right here. So that means 75 would be right here, and 74 would be right here. So I 74th is negative 1. So let's try 117. Let's go backwards this time, just to show you to work both ways. So let me try 116. 116 is divisible by 4, so that's 1. So then I just restart my pattern because it just re-loops over and over. So if this is 117, then if this is 116, then 117 would be re-looped over to 1, or to I. So that's my final answer for that one. The last two, you can FOIL it out. I'm going to show you that, or use the box method. So I do 5 minus 6i, 6 minus 2i, so I get 30, negative 36i, so just use it like a normal variable, negative 10i, and then this one will be 12i squared. So then, just like normal, we would add the diagonal. So I have 30, and the diagonal is negative 46i, and then I have 12i squared. The reason it's different is because that I squared means something. We've already talked about a couple times that I squared is the same thing as negative 1. So I'm going to replace I squared with negative 1. And the reason we do that is because now it's become real, and I can combine the 30, and now that's a negative 12. Okay, so 30 and negative 12 can add together, and that gets me 18. And then I still have this minus 46i. Now I'm going to show you an even easier way of doing this on the calculator. So you grab your calculator, and there's actually an I button, and how you get it is you hit the second, and then you hit the decimal place. See the little I there. So you can just punch that right into your calculator. So I'm going to do the one we just did, 5 minus 6, second, decimal place, and then 6 minus 2i. And there's the answer we just got. So let's do it for the last one. Negative 3 minus 2i, and then 1 minus 3i. And I get negative 9. I get negative 9 plus 7i. That's my final answer.